Welcome to the Eternal ROI podcast, where we share the real stories of workplace transformation. And now, here are your hosts, Will Stewart and Chris Patton.
Welcome to the Eternal ROI podcast. I'm Will Stewart. Good to have everybody listening and watching in. Joined as always by Chris Patton, CEO of His Way at Work. Happy New Year, Chris.
Happy New Year to you.
It's incredible. We've made it through 2020, despite everybody's prognostication.
Yeah.
We're here.
Yeah.
Now,
we've come in on two wheels skidding, but we're here.
Hey, you know what? A victory's a victory. I will take the win however I can get it. And thank you to everyone who has listened and watched along through all these episodes. Creating a podcast from scratch, it's an experiment. You know, we're trying our best to put out the very best product we can, and we've heard a lot of feedback from you guys, and just the encouragement and everything you've been able to tell us. It's just been tremendously helpful. And a special thank you to all our guests. We've had 10 fantastic guests this year. Each one has just shared their own perspective on just their life and how they're doing business and how they're doing it God's way. And everybody has their own journey. Everybody has their own challenges. But it's been incredible just watching and listening and just being inspired by all these people.
Yeah, really has.
Yeah, it's like a mentorship for me. So I love it.
I think we two of us may be getting more out of it than anybody else, but at least somebody's getting impacted, right?
Yeah, exactly. Someone's being helped. So it's episode 12, and so we're excited to be kicking off 2021, and we wanted to talk a little bit about this year, about everything leading up. So, I mean, the coronavirus has been difficult for everybody. I think everybody's had their own unique challenges. There hasn't been a single person that has not been affected somehow. And it's important more than ever to make plans, to prepare, and to really just look at 2021 and say, God, what do you have for me?
Yeah, no doubt. And I guess I'm thankful to be here looking at 21, right?
Yeah, right.
And what's coming.
Yeah, me too. What do you think the reason is? Why do we need to create a plan in our lives and prepare?
Well, so first thing that comes to my mind when you and I were talking and we thought, let's do a one podcast, one episode right at the beginning, where it's just the two of us talking about this new year and what we're going to do.
Yeah.
The first thing that came to my mind is a quote. I was in a C12 meeting probably early December, and Mike Sharrow is the CEO of C12, and C12 is a peer advisory board organization in the U.S. There's like over 2,000 Christian business owners that are members in that organization, and Mike is a friend. He's the CEO of that organization. He was quoting another Mike, a guy named Michael Ferris, and Michael is the CEO of Alliance Defending Freedom, ADF. And Alliance Defending Freedom, usually you'll see them in the background. They're not up in the news and so forth, but they are just a critical organization helping to protect religious liberty in the U.S. through legal and political methods and efforts. So anyway, Michael Ferris, ADF, is at a meeting at the White House addressing legislators and others, and he points to Mike Sharrow, who's also in the room. I didn't happen to be invited to that meeting, unfortunately, but he points to Mike Sharrow and says, you guys all think that what we do at ADF is critical and it's important. And he said, it is, but I just want to point this out. And he points to Mike about C12, and he says, C12 is a dangerous organization. Now, as Mike Sharrow's quoting Michael Ferris, dangerous stood out to me.
Yeah.
And here's the rest of his quote. Now he's referring to an organization that has 2,000 some odd businesses that are owned and operated by Christians in the U.S. and frankly out into the world beyond just the U.S. But he says this organization, they are dangerous because regardless of what policies are enacted, what elections are won, what cases are heard, what judges are appointed, or anything else in Washington, the thousands of courageous leaders in C12, which also applies to anybody listening, any Christian business owner or leader listening right now, you're in this group. These thousands of courageous leaders are impacting hundreds of thousands of people every day. Millions are influenced in a way that can shape culture and change the world today. And so the thing that comes to me that just hits me hard, and it applies to this episode today, is we want to be dangerous. And what this guy is talking about is that we're dangerous to the gates of hell. Yeah. What we do is dangerous to the enemy because we're out there impacting people directly every day. People go to church, if they do, once a week, right? 60% or so of the U.S. is unchurched, but they all have jobs. Yeah. And we're getting to impact them at their work. So I can get excited about this. I can go on and on. But the point here is, whether you're a pro athlete, you're an NFL quarterback, or you're a military leader, or even just an avid weekend hunter, deer hunter, whatever, you got to have a plan. You don't just show up and do it. That's right? You got to have a plan. And if you want to be dangerous to whatever endeavor that is, if you want to be impactful and effective, you've got to build a plan. You've got to vet that plan. You got to execute it. Yeah. And so as we go into this new year, I thought it'd be a great idea for the two of us just to kind of discuss some of the various ways to plan for this new year. And the first thing I want to start off with is the idea that probably most of the listeners today, most of you watching, have some sort of a business plan. Yep. If you don't, let's start there. I think you need that plan, right? And we all agree in consultants, you can read books upon books about strategic plans and so forth. And at His Way at Work, we do work with businesses that already have those in place typically. But the plan that I want to talk about today is more about our plan individually and your plan as a listener. As a Christian CEO or as a business leader, what is your plan for your life? What is your plan for all the various roles you have? What is your method for going out every day with a plan and executing it, other than just showing up and hoping things go well?
And that's so important because, as a business leader, you are the keystone to everything. You're the one that gets to execute. And I've been guilty of it in the past, of just having all my business side of things prepared. My business, my company as an entity, it's got a plan. Right. But it's just happening to me, and I'm just trying to respond and react to family life, friends and work and church. Right. And it doesn't go well. It really doesn't.
Sometimes it does. Yeah. But are we willing to rely on random positive outcomes? Right. Just because we got lucky or we had a break. Right. Many businesses started because of a lucky break or they expanded, but more often than not, the plan's got to be there. Sure. Right. And so, I just thought it'd be good for us to talk through that. I've got some recommended resources that I've used over the last 10, 15 years where I've been building out my personal life plan and various components of that, talk through some of that, maybe give out some tools, that kind of thing. So just see where that goes.
Yeah. So let's dig in. What do you do whenever you're kind of like getting your plan together? It's is it something you do in December? Is it a January thing? Probably that's a little probably too nuanced. But when do you start?
I get that. So basically, what I do starting off, and I got this idea. I was reading a blog. This has been years back, but a guy named Michael Hyatt, and Michael Hyatt is still very active in the leadership world. He's got a blog, he's got a business that he runs in impacting leaders. But I was reading his, and this is probably back 15 years ago-ish, and he was talking about a life plan. And I think I heard it first from him, but there were others. So I just went and started putting one together, and I didn't know what I was doing. And dang, it's been 15 years. I may still not know. But I feel like I've gotten in a rhythm. And one of the first steps in that, Will, is to figure out, who am I? That sounds like a goofy question, but there are not multiple personalities, right? But multiple roles that I play in the life that I lead. For me personally, first and foremost, I'm a disciple of Jesus Christ. That's my number one role, right? If I get that first, it's more likely the rest of these will fall into place. Sure. But I've got to be specific about that role, number one. Number two, I'm a godly husband or a loving husband, okay? I want to be a loving husband to my wife. She should come directly after God in the priority of my life. And then third, I'm a godly father, okay? So I've got those three roles. In this life plan, so to speak, and please bear with me. Some of you may not go to the extent or the detail, and that's fine, but I just want to get the concepts across that we need to really identify who we are and what roles are we going to play.
Yeah.
And for some, if you're a business owner and you're married and you've got a family, really, that may be where it stops.
Right.
You may attend a church on a regular basis to be in corporate community, corporate worship, but you may not have the time or bandwidth to lead at church. No problem, right? You may not have time to be a leader in the community. That's fine. Think through that and decide that. I'm not going to do that in this season. I'm going to put that off. So the first step, I think, is building out this plan with these various roles, defining each, and to the degree that you can, using Scripture to back it up. And so I would have a description of each role. Let me give you an example. I am a sold-out disciple of Jesus Christ. I love the Lord my God with all of my heart, my soul, my mind, and my strength, which we know where that comes from, Matthew 22. It is my first and foremost urgent priority to seek to know God in a way that is real and that serves as my primary motivation in life. I believe in a true eternal life, and therefore I live this life with an eternal perspective at all times. So that's my definition of that role. Now,
can I ask you something about that definition?
You bet.
Is that aspirational or is that currently?
Absolutely.
Okay, that's not. You're not describing you as a person today.
No, that's a good question though. I think it's who should I be and what am I trying to be, right? So it's definitely aspirational. And in doing these roles, I want to lay out, what does that mean? What is my goal as a loving husband or a godly father? And be specific, right? Around the father, I want to raise adult children that are self-sufficient, that love the Lord, and that can impact this society and this world.
Yeah.
That may be the whole definition. And then I start thinking through in my plan, year to year, what do I do this year around that? And it's going to be different if my kids are 3, 3, and 5 versus 13, 13, and 15, or in their 20s, right? So that's where I start, is with that plan, defining the roles, and figuring out what do I want it to look like. So
casting a vision for who you are and who you want to be, and then backwards engineering of this kind of person that I just described would do these kind of things in their day-to-day to get there.
So a piece of that I take from Stephen Covey, right? His 7 Habits book.
Yeah.
One of the things he talks about in there is one of the habits is starting with the end in mind. And he recommends that you basically envision your funeral, right? And write what you would like to happen at your funeral. So I took that and I went through each of these roles and I said, let's say that at the age of 70, 80, 90, whatever it is, that this is how I'd like to see the funeral go and what to be said at my funeral if I've done all these roles correctly the way I like to. And so I've got what I call an envisioned future for each of these roles. As a parent, this is what I'd like to see at the end of that. As a husband, this is what I'd like. So it kind of lays out what's that future, and then, like you said, reverse engineer into that.
That can be a little scary, can it?
Oh, it can be.
I mean, just being honest with yourself and saying, because that statement of this is who I want to be is also a statement of
I'm not.
This is who I'm not.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is tough.
Sure it is.
But it requires such vulnerability with yourself and honesty.
Well, I'll tell you something else that changes is the plan changes year to year.
Yeah.
You know, I didn't write a plan back 15 years ago when I was 35. Don't do the math. Yeah. I didn't write a plan then that is still intact today as it was.
Yeah.
It changes. My depth of knowledge of who I'm supposed to be in Christ is much stronger and clearer than it was then.
Sure.
But if I think that at 50, I've got that nailed, my 60-year-old self is going to say, man, you're crazy.
It's true.
It's going to evolve. So then you're playing over time. So you go back to what you said a minute ago, what do you do? When do you do it? So the life plan, when you start it, doesn't matter, right? You just, and it doesn't need to be this massive 20-page document.
Yeah.
It may evolve to that. It may never. Maybe a 1-page. In fact, the less, the better, right?
Sure.
So you can be more effective. But start with that, laying out roles, laying out where you want to go, how you think you can get there, and setting some goals for each of those. So my early life plan or my early plans for the new year, the goals would be frankly overwhelming. I had too many. I had 8 or 9, 10 roles the first time I did it. I had 3, 4 goals for each one, and by February I was burned out. I was done. And so that's part of the learning.
Yeah, right.
Is over time you shrink, you get more concise, you get more pointed and more effective as you do.
Because you're more likely to do 2 or 3
Yes.
than you are to do 20.
That's exactly right.
And you're way more successful.
And the experts say, and you know who the experts are, they're
Right.
whoever will tell you they are, but the experts say typically 5 to 7 goals for a year is a full boat.
I had to do 3 this
Yeah,
year.
and that's better.
I had to just like simplify it just
That's
because
better. Yeah.
I tried so hard to just spend time like agonizing over, I overachieve. I'm an overachiever, which means
Sure.
I underachieve by trying to overachieve. And I spent so much time trying to take, multiple goals and I said I this year I know I can do 3.
Yeah.
You know.
And if those 3 or 5 or 7, however many, make sure that they're SMART goals, right? Everybody's heard of that, but you go through the SMART acronym, and I won't call it all out because I'll probably forget one, but you want to make sure, I know it's specific, measurable, actionable, right? You want to make sure it's relevant, and you have a date set on there. Michael Hyatt would call it smarter goals because in addition to the normal factors, he'd want to make sure it's exciting. I know that was the E. There was an R there, I forget. But the idea is, does it excite you? Does it get you energized when you revisit these goals? Because part of having the plan is it's just like we don't treat our business strategic plan. We don't put it in a notebook and throw it up on the shelf and look at it next year.
Yeah.
It's something we go by every week, right? It's not a daily thing necessarily, but a weekly review of some of that and a monthly calendar block of time where you're kind of revisiting some of that. A book that comes to mind, Traction by Gino Wickman, and we'll have this in the show notes, but it's about EOS, which is an entrepreneurial operating system. But they recommend 90-day sprints for the business. So you do 90-day goals. They call them rocks. Yeah. And you don't try to set a 1-year goal necessarily. You set the 90-day sprints, and you get done with the 90 days, and then you can turn around and set another 90 days. So whatever works for you is great. Break it down to where it's easier chunks to absorb and to accomplish, right? And make sure it's measurable and not, hey, I'm going to be a better dad this year. So
it's relative.
Yeah, here's the test for that. At the end of the year, how do you know if you did it or not? And if it's just a better or more of or less of, unless you're measuring something, unless you've got some way to test, did I achieve the goal or not? It's going to be muddy and it will not be effective.
Yeah. And if you are a driven person who is an overachiever, today I'm giving you permission to just do a little bit. Just do something. And if this is your first time to do this kind of thing and you're interested in it, just start simple. You're 15 years in.
Exactly.
But, say, okay, I'm 1 year, I'm going to do 1 goal, or I'm going to define like 2 roles, or just start simple and start basic. Something my wife and I did, we had a busy season coming up with our business. And I said, look, we're not going to be able to have the time that we normally have together. I said, but this is what I'm going to commit to you. Every time I'm able to get home in time, before it gets too dark, we're just going to walk around the neighborhood and hold hands. We'll do that because we have a 1-year-old and a 5-year-old, so life is a little bit chaotic right now. Yeah. We're yelling over the noise,
Exactly.
We're trying to have adult conversations while little ones, interrupt. And just doing that one thing, it's just been so tremendous. It's not a fancy dinner, it's not steak, but it is just at least being intentional, trying to do something.
That's excellent. So one of the things that Hyatt talks about, he's got a program called Best Year Ever. And again, we'll include a link to that in the show notes, but it's a process that he takes you through at the end of the year to plan out for the following year, setting goals. But one of the things he suggests is, out of your goals, if there are 3, 5, 7, doesn't matter, pick one that's called the push goal. And what that means is, if I accomplish this one, then it's more likely that these others will fall into place, right?
That's good.
So think about this with your wife. It would be one thing where you could set 3 or 4 goals around the relationship you have with your wife, and you can have all these different metrics. But if you simply had the one push goal of 4 times a week, I'm going to walk, at least 3 times or whatever. I'm going to walk around the neighborhood one time with my wife holding hands.
Yeah.
What's going to happen? Well, you're going to talk.
Yeah, right.
You're going to be forced into reconciling some arguments that you had 30 minutes earlier,
Yep.
right?
Yeah.
But you're going to build relationship with her that over time, her dreams and her expectations will start coming out in those conversations. And you're showing her that her time or time with her is more important than the other things. So there's so much that'll come out of that. That's a push goal that would help you make sure the other ones come about.
That's powerful.
Sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a big
That's
deal.
really good. So looking at this life plan, we've talked about establishing roles, describing the role, setting some goals. Anything else in that life plan?
Just 2 pieces on that, and we've already kind of touched on it, but I break them out. One is the envisioned future, which is what does it look like in 30, 40, 50, 70 years, whatever that is.
Yeah, right.
But also the current reality, right? So sometimes, and you said this, you mentioned it, looking at what the envisioned future is, you realize how far off you are now.
Sure.
All right, but that's fine. Take the time to document. Take the time to at least think through, where am I in relation to where I want to be? Because without assessing the current reality, without getting a snapshot of where you are today, you can't measure and start to plan out where you're headed, right? So the recommendation for this life plan, and there's a book by Michael Hyatt and a guy named Daniel Harkavy, and it's called Living Forward. We'll put that link in there, but they walk through the life plan process, and they'll talk about the envisioned future, but also the current reality, and then the goals come around. How do I get from here to there?
Sure.
Right. So that's part of it. But then you've already asked about it. What about reviewing that? What about do you do something at the end of the year? Is it the first year?
Yeah.
What do you do there? So there's I mentioned C12 earlier. They have a product or a part of their meeting rhythm. So it's a monthly group meeting with Christian business owners. At the end of the year, every December, and I've been in that group since 2006.
Yeah.
So going back to 2006, I've got what they call the annual or yearly audit. And it's effectively, I think in the last couple of years, they've modified it a little bit, but it's effectively 7 to 10 questions or some sub-questions where it dives into different areas. It's not exactly lining up with my roles, but it's close.
Yeah, right.
And they've got six or eight different areas of your life that they're digging into. And it's just a stop at the end of the year and look back and, are you more in relationship, a deeper relationship with God, or less than last year? And here's some sub-questions that might help you determine that. And effectively, I go through in my process is sometime between the 10th, 15th of December and the end of the year. Historically, for the car business, the last week of the year was just crazy.
Right.
So I had to get it done before that.
Yeah.
Well, with his way at work, now it's kind of reversed. The last week or so of the year is a little easier. So that's when I'm doing it. So I'm doing an annual review, and I'm using that C12 the tool, and we'll put that as a download so that you can download that exact copy, and they gave us permission to do that. So Thank you to C12 for that. But this annual audit tool, and you just go through and you do a deep dive about how was my 2020? Sure. How good was the year? Did I accomplish what I wanted to? If you had a plan for this past year and you had goals set, review those at the same time. Here's the trick. And here, if you hear nothing else, hear this. If you're going to do something awesome, whatever it is, get away. Don't try to sit in your office at work
Right.
or at home
Right.
and say, I'll just do this for the next hour or two tonight. For 2 reasons. One is there is an enemy.
Yeah.
And if you're putting a plan together to become more effective as a Christian business leader, more effective as a husband, wife, father, mother, whatever, you're going directly against that enemy. You're becoming dangerous.
Yeah.
That enemy would much rather have us not have a plan.
Yeah.
So to the degree you want that, and you don't carve some time away, remove all distractions, and dedicate and block any efforts to overwrite that time on your calendar, if you don't do that, it's going to go away. You will find yourself mid to late January or even February, March, and you never did get that done.
Yeah.
Because it is not in the enemy's best interest for us to have a plan.
Yeah. And I'd say, so if anybody's listening to this right now, just look at your calendar. If you're interested in doing a life plan, look at your calendar if you haven't done one yet, and just figure out where's that gap, where's an afternoon you can take, or a morning, whatever your thing is, and just set it aside, and then talk to all the stakeholders in your life, the people who are the people that text you and call you, and just say, look, I'm doing something very important. Instead of interrupting me then, will you pray for me then?
Man, that's powerful.
Yeah.
That's strong. Yeah, I'm going to add that to mine if you don't mind.
That one's free.
Good. So all of this is free, just to be clear.
Yeah.
Right? We're just giving this stuff away.
So what do you do if somebody, and I'm probably getting some free therapy here. As an Enneagram 3, I'm someone that's driven by success. I want to make sure that I appear successful. How do you, when someone looks at that list of the past, maybe past goals that weren't reached, 2020 was just a nightmare for a lot of people, because the monkey of all wrenches came flying at us, right? How do we reconcile the failures of 2020 and not get discouraged into 2021?
Man, that's perfect. So again, I'll quote Hyatt, and he had something that he called the gap versus the gain principle. And so the idea is, we've got this goal out in the distance, and it's in many ways it's kind of like your dad when he was teaching you to swim, right? He keeps backing up as he's telling you, come on.
Right.
And the idea is like chasing the horizon. Our goals are typically, if you're especially a 3 Enneagram, our goals are so far out there, and we've got such high aspirations, such a high bar that we're shooting for, that when we don't hit it, there's disappointment, there's discouragement, all of the things you just described.
Sure.
And typically what we're measuring is the gap. We're looking at where we are today, what we were trying to achieve, and we look at the gap.
Yeah.
And it just kills us. And it doesn't matter if the gap is this small, because then we say, well, man, just a little bit more effort, I could have gotten there. Yeah. And if it's massive, we're saying, well, God, there was no hope.
Right. I tried the best I could.
Yeah.
Still.
Either way, it's negative.
Yeah.
And what Hyatt said is, instead, let's take where we are today and go back and measure where we were January, and measure the gain in any of those categories. Now, we still have to have goals. We're not always looking in the rearview mirror. There's still a windshield. Yeah. But if we have those situations, and the more often we can do this, we can take a look backward and say, you know how far I've come this year? You know how far I've gained in my walk with Christ? Or, I was able to read the Bible and journal and pray 200 times this year, even though my goal was a daily quiet time.
Sure.
But the year before, it was like 3 times, right? So I've made huge gains. Yeah. So celebrating the gain instead of focusing on the gap, I think, is a huge way for us to do that.
Yeah, that's powerful. That really is. Because 2020, a lot of goals that were set, weren't able to be met. Yeah. But there's so many successes and victories. And Yeah, it absolutely does. And that goes back to your 90-day sprint.
Correct.
If you think of it in quarters, then that's going to
then you don't fall into that 1-year trap.
Yeah, for sure. So we talked a little bit about life plan, or we talked a lot about life plan. There's some other plans that we can set up. Yeah. What are some of the other things that people can do to prepare for 2021?
So some things that I think should be on our minds as we put these life plans together. And to the degree if we're married and we're in a marriage relationship, and maybe even if we're not, if single parent, you got kids, depending on their ages, I think it could be helpful, but I think we need to have a giving plan. All right, so if we actually believe what Scripture says, then most of what we have is God's. No, I'm sorry, I got that wrong. It's everything we have is God's.
That's right.
We are simply stewards of our business. It's His. We are stewards of our children. They're His.
Yeah.
And the sooner we can get the mindset that I am simply a steward of a marriage, some children, a business, resources, whether it's financial resources, talent, skills, ability, resources, time is a resource of mine. All of these things are assets that I can give. So then I need to lay out a plan for how much I'm going to give. Now, I'm going to tell you something. I've told you this kind of stuff evolves.
Right.
Just recently, have been reading a book with my wife called God and Money, and I'll put a link in there for that. It's by Gregory Ballmer and John Cortines. But it's God and Money, and they did a lot of research on mentions of money in the Bible, and they came up with one summary of their entire book. So if you don't want to have to read the whole book, here it is in just one flip of a question. Instead of asking how much should we give, which for many couples, many individuals, that is a tension that is constant, right?
Sure.
The church is saying, well, I should give 10%. Well, scripturally, if you talk about the tithe, it's actually 2 tithes of 10% plus another one every third year of 10% for a total of 23%. The church is, that's Old Testament, so we're not pushing that. But the idea is even the 10 is not enough, right? But there's always this tension around how much should I give? I've got bills, I've got all these responsibilities. And these guys write this whole book, and they said, but the summary of the book is we flipped it from how much should we give to how much should we keep.
That's powerful.
Because if it's all God's, if I could lay every resource that my wife and I have as a family on this table, it's all His. So laying it on the table to say, all right, God, it's yours. Now, how much of this do we need to keep for our family? So I'll take this section right here. Now, some might, depending on your responsibilities and whatever, you may have to take this whole section right here. Maybe, but it's starting with the idea that it's all His. How much do we keep? And then the rest of it is going to Him. We're in a transition from measuring out how much should we give and how do we do that. We've had very detailed plans around that and tried to. My goal is if I get a windfall tomorrow, I know where it's going and how it's going to be split up. I don't have to think through it every time.
Right.
Because my heart, not so pure, right? And if I get this windfall, I'm going to be thinking immediately, if I don't already have a plan, I'm going to be thinking immediately what I could buy with that.
Right.
And some of that may go to what I could buy with it.
Yeah.
But there's also the question of how much of that is His. Well, it's all. So anyway, we could talk on that for hours. I'm still in transition on this. I'm trying to figure that out. But the idea is have a plan.
Yeah.
Don't just wait until the plate comes by at church, if we can even do that anymore, right? To say, well, I'll put a 20 in or I'll just do something. No. Pray about it. Ask God for that.
And that mindset change is so powerful because I think it prepares us for the opportunities to get more through our business, financially, and to be blessed financially. I mean, that's the goal. We want our businesses to grow and thrive and prosper, right? And God has put in us a desire to work and to be successful and to be leaders and that sort of thing. So there's nothing wrong with that. That's a God-given gift. But if we prepare today, while maybe the money's small or when everything's not exactly how it needs to be, and we prepare our mindset and our heart to be able to, if God, you decide to bless me, this is what I'm doing. I've already decided. It's set in stone. That's powerful.
Yeah.
It really is.
Yeah.
How do you get buy-in from those who are affected by a life plan? So, if you're doing this with your spouse or your family, like how do you get those people on board and excited about what you feel like God's wanting you to do in 2021?
All right. So I see two. To start off with, I see two answers. There may be a third as I talk this out.
Sure.
The first thing is, for the portion of my life plan that does not require their involvement or their involvement, I may not even share it because I'm working on me. So I may have several goals that are personal, spiritual. Now, if my wife said, if my wife came to me and said, would you please detail to me all of what's in your life plan, then you might want to check her because somebody's replaced her. That would bore her to death. Not that she doesn't love me, but she knows I go into too much detail.
Right.
But so it's not that I would hide it or keep it from her. It's just I'm not going to go and say, let me tell you what all I'm doing.
Sure.
But there are portions of it, for example, the giving part, that she's a partner with me.
Yeah.
That none of that is just me. I'm the husband. She's the wife, the two are one, and that's our stewardship of his money.
Sure.
So to that extent, we make it a regular conversation. So when I started through this book, God and Money, I got 2 or 3 chapters in and I realized, oh no, this is going to change a lot. And I stopped and I went and ordered a second copy. And I went to her and I said, would you be willing to read this with me and go through chapter by chapter and have conversation and let's figure out what God's doing.
That's good.
Rather than, hey, babe, I just read a book and it changes everything about how I see money. Guess what our new budget is? How do you think that goes over, right?
Yeah, no one wants
so
that.
It's involving them in that which they should be involved in, that which impacts what you're doing or they're impacted by what you're doing. If I were to make some plans that required investment, like I'm going to work out this year and I need to go buy a gym and put it in the backyard, that's something that would impact her. I'd need to get her to agree or to see the why behind it. So it's the communication, getting them involved. So I think that's why it's 2 different things. It's really more about how much does it really involve them and what's too much to share and bore them with, I guess.
Sure. And I guess the important thing is if you're on a journey that affects them, bring them at the very beginning of the journey. Don't come in all excited.
Yes.
Be like, this is what God's doing, because they're not going to see it as God's work.
No, that's right. And I'll tell you something else that comes to mind. The way you get people excited around you about your life plan is you do it for a year or 2 and you let it start changing you in the way you impact them and have them say, what are you doing? How are you making this work? And you go, well, it's this little life plan I've been trying to work on. I'm not great at it, but this is what I'm doing. Yeah. And literally years back, I had some friends that wanted to go through that process. So I've had some different groups that I've been in, just walking them through what I'm figuring out as I'm doing it again.
That's great. That's powerful. It really is. So there's the giving plan. There's also that family life vacation thing. The vacation, that's always hard for me, trying to find time to get away and get away from the business because, I like to say if I'm not rowing, the boat ain't going.
And there's so many of our business owners out there and business leaders that are the producers, right? And I get that. There's a difference between when you're the producer, you're the one doing, a dentist, a doctor. If I don't see a patient, I don't get paid. Yeah. Versus the other business owner that has people that continue working when they leave for vacation, right? So there's a difference there. I get that. But let's assume we'll treat them all the same in this general idea. And the idea here is this. Now, it's early January now. It's still not too late. But my preference is toward the end of the year, as you're doing your annual review, as you're doing your life plan for the following year, setting the goals, lay out how much time are you going to take with your family that, by the way, in God's priority list resides right above your work. Yeah. And to those that are in ministry and say, well, but what I do at work is for God, so that really pulls it back up to the top. Wrong. Your individual relationship with God is the first priority, no doubt. Yes. But your second priority is your relationship, if you're married, with your spouse. Yeah. If you have kids, that's third, right? And then after both of those is work. And I don't care if you're a pastor of a church or you're digging ditches, your work comes after your family. Yes. Now, unfortunately, with pastors of churches and others, the expectations of those who are in their congregation and so forth think that they're superhuman. They don't need time off. Right. They can answer phones 24/7, and if they miss a single thing, then they're just in trouble. They're just terrible at their job. Right. We just have to fight that. Sure. Right. So here's the thing: set out time, determine how much time you're going to take. Let's say, all right, I'm going to take 2 weeks vacation this next year. That's how much I'm allotted. When are we going to do it? And I'm getting with my wife. And if the kids are of age where they can have input, when are they available? Right? I've got 2 kids in college now, and a third that just graduated is looking for work. And so their schedule is not going to be the same as ours.
Sure.
So one, we may go without them at least one of those weeks, right?
Yeah.
But if you're determined to bring them in, and we are, then we try to find a week that makes sense. And let's say it's mid-July. That week is blocked off, period. I might not even know where we're going or what we're going to do, but that's sacred. And that comes before any business scheduling I do. And if I have to make changes, I can't say that should never happen.
Sure.
But man, that should be a prayerful change. That should be an existential threat to the business, or just a once-in-a-lifetime thing. Yeah. And if you've had 4 of those this year, they're not once in a lifetime, right?
That's a good point.
Or if you look back over the 4 years, and every year, well, you wouldn't believe there's another one of these once in a lifetime, then you got a problem.
Yeah.
Point being, block off the time, protect it, and get the kids involved in what you're going to do and how you're going to do it and so forth if they can. But the same should be true with time individually. So let's say we've got 2 weeks vacation, but you still have your non-working hours if you're an employee of somebody. If you're the employer, you have all the hours. Yeah. Take some hours, carve them out on a regular basis for solitude, for reflection, for rest, right? If you and your spouse can go off for a weekend once a quarter, you leave a half a day early from work, but that once a quarter, 2.5 days out of the business, out of the hustle and bustle, you're refreshed. It's a Sabbath type mindset, right? Yeah. And carving time out to rest, reflect, recharge, that kind of thing. One of my days every year is this life planning process. I take this out of the office, out of the house, and I work on this for the day. So we've got to have those as well.
And I was going to ask about that. Like, so it's a day's activity to get this plan together? Is it a full day? Is it
well,
like,
it didn't start out that way,
yeah.
And it doesn't have to be that way.
Yeah.
The more important than the amount of time is the purity of the time, in my mind.
Yeah.
So if you can only carve out 3 consecutive hours, because you're the producer and that 3 hours may cost you, a ton of money, carve those 3 hours out the first time and make some progress and start high level. And then as you grow and as you get further down the path, build that and increase that as you can. I think you're going to find that the time that you carve out for that kind of reflection and planning pays more dividends going forward, and God redeems that time. So I think actually you really come out ahead. Even if you take 4 or 5 days a year to do that kind of thing, the payoff is much greater.
And I mean, I know we all like to think of ourselves as busy and important, but I don't know if there's really that many people in the world that could not spend 4 hours away, planning for something that's going to change and directly impact their health, their mental and emotional health, their physical health, and also the health of the ones around them, and get life prepared.
And let's just put it this way. So you enter life without a business.
Yeah.
You also exit life without a business.
Yeah. Yeah.
But your life, what you do from entering to exiting this life, is going to impact eternity. Yeah. And do you really want to go through that however many years without a plan, without taking the time to revise, review, vet, improve, and just hope that what you did in the business is good enough?
Yeah.
Now, I say good enough. I'm not talking salvation, guys. I'm just simply talking about the eternal reward, the eternal life after this. What we do and how we do this life impacts that one.
And we're given talents. There's
no
the
doubt.
parable
and
of talents.
We will be held accountable
Yes.
for those talents.
What do you do with it?
Exactly.
How are you going to spend it?
And let's go back to that whole idea, in that we take our business, the income it generates, the income we have as employees or as individuals, the assets we have, all of which God's put in our hands as stewards. But the question you have to answer is why? What's His purpose?
Yeah.
And the degree to which we use, manage, leverage, execute on those, and don't go after his purpose, every bit of that's wasted.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And that's a great call to action to, if you're thinking about doing it, just stop thinking about doing it and just take a few hours and just start, It's definitely something I'm working on as well, because as I've heard about yours and we've been talking about this, it's just like, wow, this is something I want to do even more in depth than before. So we've made this plan. We've made this. It's beautiful. It's laminated. We print it out and we put it on this shelf somewhere, and we're done, right? Like,
right beside our strategic plan of the business, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's done. We're nothing more to do, right?
Right.
Yeah. So what should people do now they've made their plan? What are some of the things we should do to revisit and review and to make sure that we're staying on schedule?
That's a good point. So some of this answer depends on how you've set your goals, right? So we've talked about the 90-day sprints. That's usually more effective. Some goals we have may be we're going to participate in this incredible Ironman triathlon, whatever, and in October of this year. So that runs across 3 different quarters. Mm-hmm. Don't let that be a single quarter training process, because then you're toast, right? So you break it down into the sprints however you want to. But here's the idea is weekly reviews. Literally taking maybe 30 minutes a week. Sunday night is a good time to stop and just look back over the week. Look at your goals for that week and what you're working on. If you've got your 3, how did I do this week in those 3? Yeah. Find some way to track how well you did. Yeah. It doesn't mean that you got to get your measuring tape out and measure every little thing, but have some way to even journal about how did I do this week. But put something down on a weekly basis. So you're constantly reviewing and thinking about what these things are that God's led you to do, because this is all bathed in prayer and it's all according to his purposes. What is it that you're doing? How well are you doing in these plans? And make adjustments as you go, but keep the reviewing on a weekly basis is the recommendation. I've got a weekly review, but then a monthly meeting. I'm in a C12 group, so I've got monthly accountability with that group. There was a time in my life when I had a couple years where I was not in C12, and so I went and found 3 other guys that could be my accountability group for my goal setting for every month. So monthly we would meet in my office and spend a couple hours going through, how are you doing? How am I doing? What's some ideas? And it was amazing the stuff that would come out of that monthly review. And then quarterly, just kind of a refresh. Maybe you go back over the life plan and remind yourself of your roles. One of the things that we didn't talk about, but when you have your goals set, is making sure you put, and Hyatt does this in Best Year Ever, make sure you put the why behind that particular goal. So if it is, I'm going to participate in the Ironman in October, which means I've got to start training now. And it comes to 3 or 4 weeks from now, and I've got a couple of days where I don't feel good and I don't want to do it. Right. And then I measured that on the following Sunday review, and I go, man, I missed 3 days this week in a row. What's going on? Is that really that important? If I reflect back on the why, and the why was not so I could get the t-shirt, right? The why was so that I'm around at 80 and can enjoy my grandkids on the ground playing with them instead of in a bed being introduced to them, right? Yeah. So I want to be healthy at that age. So therefore I'm going to do some extreme things between now and then. Yeah. But not so extreme that I don't even make it to that age, right? That would be the 1/4 of training for an Ironman. Right, yeah. But it's get the why and dig deep to find that why. And to the degree you tap into something really special in the why, you'll also have more strength when you get into that messy middle of that goal. Sure. Right? Yeah. So I think that's a big help.
That's powerful. This has been incredible, just hearing about your life plan. It's a great encouragement. To me, and I'm sure it's been to others as well. Anything that we've missed? Anything to add? I feel like we've covered pretty much everything here.
One small thing. So there's a book called Atomic Habits.
Yes.
And James Clear, I think, is the author. And Atomic Habits, I won't go through the whole book, the idea, but for some of us, building the right habits, making them consistent can be a challenge, and especially when we don't have a plan on how we're going to do that. Right. And so Atomic Habits is just a brilliant book about how to take it down to the smallest incremental change. And if we can make super small, atomic meaning at the level of the atom is what he's saying, not the explosion atomic, but at the level of the atom, making incremental change in our lives and building upon those changes over time, then we can build very deeply ingrained habits that help us achieve what we want to achieve. So for me, I'm just not good at saying, all right, I'm going to start working out next week.
Right.
It's always next week or Monday or at the first of the month, first of the year, whatever. But he shows how you can just do very simple incremental changes that over time will get you to where you want to be. So that's a strong recommendation.
That's incredible.
That book.
What do you think the big takeaway is from today?
Have a plan.
Yeah.
I mean, don't just wing it. Majority of the business owners we talk to have some sort, maybe very thin, maybe 2 volumes of a business plan, but they don't plan the rest of their lives.
No.
And frankly, to the degree we plan the rest of our life, we will see fruit in our work.
Absolutely.
Because we become a better person, a better leader, a more compassionate, more approachable leader when we're working on personal issues and personal things in this life plan idea. So the one big takeaway for me is just get a plan. Start with something. Set one goal for this year, make it a smarter goal, track it, watch it, and build on it. And then to the degree you can, bring in accountability and involvement from those around you. But start with something. Don't just wing it.
And if it's written, it becomes a contract.
Yes.
It's not just something that's out in the ether somewhere.
That's right.
But write it down. And if you're a keyboard guy, type it out and then print it out. But and sign your name to it. Do something. Make it a contract with yourself.
Yeah, that's good.
So this has been fantastic. It's been great chatting with you about this. I think 2021 can be a powerful year. It doesn't have to be the year of whatever label that people outside in the world declare it to be.
That's right.
2021 doesn't have to happen to us. We can happen
to it.
20. Yeah,
yes. Exactly. Good point.
And it's God's plan in our lives, and it's us saying, God, what do you want me to do? How do I do it?
Yeah.
So this is all powerful stuff. Thank you, everyone who has watched and listened. Really just want to repeat that again. We just appreciate you guys so much. This is the end of episode 12, and we have so many great episodes coming up. We have Corrine Reuter, who's going to be episode 13, and she's going to be incredible.
That's a good one.
It's just going to be amazing. So we got these great guests lined up for 2021, and we're excited to share all of that with you. So if you have any questions about life plans or anything like that, just reach out to His Way at Work, and they certainly can help you guys out. So until then, everyone be safe, and hope you have a wonderful and a prosperous and one that's filled with God's blessings for 2021.
Thank you for listening. Hope you found some value in today's discussion. If you're inspired and you'd like to learn more, His Way at Work has a number of resources and tools for you. Just check us out at hwaw.com. If you're new here and you'd like to check out more episodes, just go to Facebook or to any podcast platform and make sure to subscribe there. Or if you know somebody that might find value in what we're talking about, feel free to share with them and point them in our direction. Thanks again for listening. We'll see you next time.